الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنام سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين وصحبه الطاهرين. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would like to begin, as Dr. Peyman did, by thanking the brothers and the sisters, especially those who have the daunting task of dealing with the kids. It's not an easy thing to do. So I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would grant them patience and thank them for their collaboration. I would like also to remind the sisters that if it is possible to turn their cell phones either off or put them on the silence. I began the discussion last night in attempting to explain ultimately the values that have been encapsulated in the life of Ahlul Bayt, but particularly with regard to Ashura, to point out that there is a critical need for self-reflection. What I mean by self-reflection will become clear as I unpack what I intend to say. I began the conversation again by going back to the Holy Quran and posing the question, who is a human being, as a theme, thematically, and try to find out what the Holy Quran answers. If we look at Surah Al-Baqarah from verse 30, at least up to 35, 36, and 37, broadly speaking, Quran delineates what is the beginning of what one could call the genesis from an Islamic point of view. It states that humans have a unique creation from nothing, as the narrative exists in Christian theology or in Latin in particular, from ex nihilo. No prior modality existed for the creation of human beings. It was something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began with it. The complex nature of human being has two components and two dimensions, the clay and the spirit. The clay was constructed and the divine spirit was blown into it. Naturally, this complex nature or dimension that exists in human existence or creation creates a conflict between what we call today a material life and the spiritual life. We are encouraged and told to reach a balance between the two. But we are also reminded what is the essence of humanity is not the material component, but the spiritual component. And that's what we have to pay attention to, rather than at the expense of one or the other, reach a balance. One thing which is critical, we see in a number of ahadith, that asks everyone, all human beings, to understand her or his position in what we call in the cosmic order. من عرف نفسه فقد عرف ربه. There is a direct linkage and a relation between self-understanding and understanding of the divine. This needs to be unpacked. Here, the ma'rifah and the understanding that is necessary, it's not the physical reality that we have to pay attention to. This has nothing to do with the divine dimension. It's understanding the spiritual component that exists within our reality. And this was part of the question that the sister asked last night as to how do we reach a balance. I tried to explain to her. I'll expand on it later. I need to add to it. But at least what is absent is in trying to create the balance, مَنْ عَرَفَ نَفْسَهُ فَقَدْ عَرَفَ رَبَّهُ. We focus on the physical reality more than the spiritual reality or the spiritual component. And the reason for this is the fact that we really don't understand our critical importance or the cosmic relation between the whole existence and ourselves. There is a hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen sallallahu alayhi that says, أَتَحْسَبُ أَنَّكَ جِسْمٌ صَغِيرٌ وَفِي كَمْ طَوَى الْعَالَمُ الْأَكْبَرُ. You think that you are something simple and minuscule, no importance? You are the miniature representation of the entire cosmos. The complexity of the cosmos exists in you. And once we understand this, then we can comprehend this notion, the relationship between self-reflection and self-understanding from one side, and the divine understanding from the other. The reason why I want to expand this, because I believe, particularly for us living in the West, there are a number of issues that we really need to touch upon. There is no doubt, nobody, no scholar that has analyzed, explained, delineated, whatever narrative we use, the issue of Karbala, has not admitted the multi-layered, complex nature that is before us. Not just Karbala itself, Ahlul Bayt, and generally speaking, Islam. Multi-dimensional. Also, there is another component here, that if we consider classical environment where we have grown, whether it is, say, let's mention few countries in the Middle East, whether we live in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, wherever, Egypt, North Africa, there is a relationship between what we call small community, larger community, and the largest community. Let me explain. Let's look at the Shia, part of the Muslim Ummah. Yes, there are individuals and ideologies, particularly the Wahhabis, that they don't consider us to be part of the Muslim Ummah, but let's leave that to be a margin. It doesn't reflect the entire Muslim community. So we have a small group of people, percentage of the Muslim Ummah that calls itself Shia. There is a larger community that is within the Shia becomes part of it, the Muslim community. With the advent of globalization, particularly with the migration, it has created a new market, let's call it by its name, a new market, opened up a new space that becomes, that could be the target or the place where we can become active. So you have, say, the Shia community, the Muslim community in general, and then the world community. This complex relationship naturally poses the question, how do we unpack something which could be inherently Shia understanding and theological or jurisprudential one, or historical, to a bigger circle, and from there move it into even the larger circle of the world community. Taking the methodology that existed and could have worked in a small circle, call it the Shia community, and automatically assuming that it would work when we step one stage to a larger community, even the Muslims that we have a lot in common, it's not going to work. Because their sensitivities, their culture, their understanding, particularly in the West, their secular interpretation, their religious interpretation, liberal political point of view, economics, etc., changes their views. We have to be mindful of these factors when we step and cross the boundary as Shia into the Muslim milieu. Now, what will happen if we suddenly decide to even cross that bigger boundary into a much larger environment, where they have hardly anything in common, particularly beyond some what we call humanistic values, and particularly in the light of constant propagation and disfiguring of Islam and the Muslim community that exists in the West. How do we take the values that we have and try to move into a different environment and propagate it? There is a story narrated from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq salawatullah wasalam alayhi. Shahid Mutahari has this story in his book Dastan al-Rastan, and the true that he considers to be all the traditions to be trustworthy and so on. Imam explains to his, or whether metaphorically or a true story, explains and warns his followers to be mindful of the cultural differences that exist. And he says, don't be like a person who convinced his Jewish neighbor to convert to Islam, and then the next day at 2 o'clock in the morning he goes to the house and knocks at the door. So the man wakes up, says, well, let's go to the mosque. Why? Well, there are prayers early in the morning that you need to do. So from one prayer, mustahab and recommended, to another prayer until Adhan al-Subh is recited. Well, the man thought that was the end of it. He wants to go home. Again, no, there are other prayers to be done. Literally, this journey to the mosque took the whole morning till noon. Then the Muslim guy let him loose. Well, now you can go home. Next morning when he went to his house, okay, we have to go. He said, look, this is not a religion for me. I have a family to deal with. I have to earn a living, etc., etc. Go and find somebody else who doesn't have time, does have time and doesn't have anything else to do. Use it as a metaphor. You can focus on a number of issues which could have relevance or meaning in the shorter circle, the smaller circle, and larger circle. But when you cross the boundary into the larger circle around, then it becomes critical. because the culture is not the same. The sensitivity is not the same. In a society that really has no value, at least on the surface, one could debate this notion of secular society and its association with religion, but on the surface, say that it has no value, no respect for religion. Doesn't understand the concept of martyrdom. Yes, you can sit with a Catholic priest and discuss the concept of martyrdom from a Christian perspective and Islamic perspective, because there are some similarities. But a general Joe on the street has no vague understanding, if any, about martyrdom. For them, the martyrs are the American soldiers that go and kill other people and get killed in other countries and they come back. This is the closest notion of martyrdom that they come to. Now, try to focus on the concept of martyrdom and try to reduce the whole uprising of Imam Hussein into this concept, which is as foreign to the ordinary person as anything you can imagine. Let's not go even far to the largest community. You want to put it to test, go home. Ask these younger brothers. If you haven't told them anything about Ashura, if you haven't explained to them anything about Ashura, ask the younger sisters and the younger brothers to tell you about this notion of martyrdom. And you understand the challenge. At least once a year they come to the mosque, they are brought to the mosque, asked to come here, forced to come to the mosque, whatever way we explain it, but at least they have heard something about it, and to see whether they have a good understanding of it. Now, if this is the case, and as we move from a circle to a bigger circle, we really need to change our methodology. I remember a friend of mine married an American sister, and one day came to the mosque during Moharram, and whether it was intentional or not intentional, brought his mother-in-law, who happened to be Christian, to the mosque. And during that critical time that she was sitting with the sisters and being entertained, suddenly the whole mosque erupted in latmiyas, and few brothers took out chains and so on and began beating their back. That was the end of the sister coming to the mosque. Their sensitivities and understanding and cultural values are totally different. So how do we go about this multi-layered complex that exists, whether it's the life of Imam, whether it's uprising of Karbala, or anything else? How do we go about explaining this to people who have no notion, historically, culturally, sensitivity, etc., etc.? Yesterday, Dr. Payman took me to an island here, a very affluent community. When you are driven around and you look at who are wandering around, bunch of people, the only thing that they care about is to wake up at 10 o'clock in the morning, go and visit probably their psychologist and psychoanalyst, have a visit to the masseur to get a massage, and then the nearest cafe to spend chit-chatting, and probably after that, within an hour, the most expensive restaurant that you can find, and turn a Porsche coupe, the cover down, and drive on the street. That's the end of the life. Now suddenly you're trying to explain to them the notion of martyrdom, human spirituality. Come on, it's double Dutch to them. We really need to find a way to explain it to these individuals, because whether we like it or we don't, by force of circumstance or by choice, we are going to live here. And we need to plan for the future. The first step in this long process, dynamic process, is the point what we call self-understanding. Who are we here? What are our values? How many layers exist in this cultural values and the spiritual values? What are the language that we have to use to deliver this message to somebody else? What are the methodologies? Do we have to reinvent the wheel, or we can take inspiration from other communities that have been here and they have done that? What are the sensitivities of the new culture, etc., etc., etc.? Self-understanding or self-reflection starts the process. Who you are as a Shia, as a part of a Muslim community, and as part of the bigger Christian, or call it secular community. What are your values? How can you explain them? What is the language that you should use? What are the narrative that, is it the classic language of Islam that probably has some values within Muslim community, or we need to develop new narratives for it? Self-reflection and understanding our role, which I call it the cosmic responsibility, not only the cosmic relationship, the cosmic responsibility here begins with self-understanding and self-reflection. There is a hadith, Man nasaba nafsahu linnasi imaman, this is from Amir al-Mu'mineen sallallahu alayhi, فَلْيَبْدَعْ بِتَعْلِيمِ نَفْسِهِ قَبْلَ تَعْلِيمِ غَيْرِهِ. Before you take this responsibility out and try to explain it to somebody else, you teach yourself exactly what's your role here. And teaching means, Dr. Shariati used to use this method or proverb, or call it metaphor, quite a lot. He said, poor defense of Islam is the worst attack on Islam. Put yourself in a position. You are a student. Are you able to stand in front of the fellow students and defend your faith? If not, before you open your mouth, go and learn. You work in an environment. Before you talk about Islam to your colleagues, ask yourself the same question. Do you understand how to defend Islam? Wishy-washy defense is not going to work. Man nasaba nafsahu linnasi imama. You want to be the guide. You want to be the leader. You want to be the one that makes a contribution to this community as members of this society. Then you really need to learn yourself. And this is the critical issue. Don't just come to these meetings. Use it as a motivator. These meetings as a motivator to start your own group and understand, let's start from where we are. I'm a scholar of religion, but I work primarily in an academic area. The universities. Although by tradition I'm a theologian, but at the same time, at the moment, I teach at the university. So that's the environment that I have to focus upon. And I'm sure there are a number of scholars here. There are others who work in an office. There are individual students, teachers, and so on. Ta'aleem starts by learning and then exemplifying, manifestly embodying the law. You become the walking, the talking law. As long as you're going to show a contradiction between what you talk and how you behave, it's not going to work. They see through you very quickly. We have a responsibility. So the message, other people worked hard in the previous generations, back home, from Iraq, others from Iran, others from Afghanistan, Lebanon, Syria, or anywhere else. Our parents worked, let's give them benefit of the doubt, they worked hard, at least the basic understanding was there. Are we going to do the same thing for the next generation? For these brothers and sisters that are sitting here? Or, let's make it clear, in marketing there are what we call the 4P concept. One of them, you said, product, place, promotion, and the price. If we try to use it in this community, brothers and sisters, the price that we are going to pay in the future, not somebody else will pay to us, the price that we are going to pay in the future is going to be the closing of centers like this, as now we see synagogues being closed, churches being closed, temples being closed and left out for sale. We have not only a responsibility to take the message, learn the message, embody the message, practice the message, find a language that would teach our next generation, the bigger circle, the Muslim community around us, as well as the entire community. Inshallah, with the help of Allah and the presence in these kind of gathering, we will succeed. I've exceeded the time. I would like to ask again for the questions, but before I entertain addressing any question, I would like to go back to the question that the sister posed last night. I kept thinking about it thank you very much. I made a distinction, sister, between the spiritual dimension and the physical, the material dimension. My critique for the absence of the spiritual dimension stands. The absence of that is critical. There is one thing which we have to pay attention to. Not only our attention to the material life has been at the expense of what we call the spiritual dimension, it has been at the expense of what we call the structural building that we need to progress and move forward. We really have no long-term plan for our community. We seem to willingly or unwillingly stumble from one program to the next. And because they are jagged, not part of an overall plan, they will not, even if they succeed in producing any result temporarily, it's going to remain temporary. Once you are exposed to all the temptations outside, within a month or two, it's back to school. So the structure, whether it's school, Catholics, not only they have schools, starting from literally pre-kindergarten, going right to the universities. I was invited about 6 months ago to go to a Catholic university and deliver a lecture. When you look at the curriculum, it's what we call Catholic-oriented. Yes, they allow the privilege to discuss other religions, but they have high schools, they have hospitals, they have social clubs. I grant you, nobody is asking to take this quantum leap and jump forward, but there is no attempt by any community to structure itself and move gradually forward. Even Buddhists, they have their own schools, their own temples, their own universities, etc., etc. We are unfortunately absent in the midst of the social milieu. And the emphasis on material gain is not only at the expense of the spiritual one, it's also at the expense of the structural one. Why such a huge number of the Shia community or the Muslim community should come and shouldn't have a true center for itself? Why shouldn't we have schools? Where do we want? I mean, ask yourself this critical question. We are here now. Where would you like to be in 10 years from now? Sisters and brothers, I have asked every center that I have, the one that I worked or others, and I'm yet to have a convincing answer that this is where we are and we want to be somewhere else in 10 years from now. Lack of a structure. Go ahead.
Sorry,
no, it's okay.
I wanted to thank you first for giving such a complete answer, and I really couldn't agree more. It's as if you reaffirmed a lot of the things that I've always believed and thought. But I also wanted to follow up with a second question in light of what you just talked about, and I'm not sure if it's the time or the place, because it is going to open as a Pandora's box.
Well, you can ask the question and I'll be the judge whether it's the right place or time, and I could say, okay sister, come back on Thursday.
Exactly. So my question is, like, in light of you saying that do not give a full defense of Islam, whether it is concerning anything in any aspect of our religion, one thing which seems to be in today's time, at least in contemporary time, a very difficult task to explain not only to the larger communities, as you were mentioning, but within our own community, this is becoming a place of conflict and contention because we have our children being indoctrinated in schools, and this is in regards to homosexuality, and that we don't have enough progressive academic, whatever you want to call it, we don't have progressive morality, as you were saying, to combat that, to be able to disclaim that and to defend our position, so that it is not only protecting ourselves and children, but that our needs.
Well, just brief answer, and then we can expand on it on Thursday. There are people who agree with us on that particular point of view, the Catholic. There was a conference in Egypt, what they call it the Feminist Conference, in Egypt about 10 or 12 years ago. And it was this Muslim-Christian convergence and working together that they were able to not allow the Western feminists to come and impose this and make it as part of the ultimate kind of decision that they wanted, or the theme that they wanted to pass. We can work with a number of others. But let's leave how do we deal with it and what is the process till Thursday. May I remind brothers and sisters, as they try to write the question, think about if you can find the answer from, say, the opinion of your marja. The book of your marja is available, you can go to it and find out the view of your marja. Don't ask that question. It's much easier to go back to it and get a full comprehensive answer rather than to discuss this a little bit further. The concept of dua, I leave it till Thursday. This is the prerogative of being the speaker, and you can decide. Do you think that it is required for women in Islam to cover their hair? Come back on Thursday, we can discuss this notion of hijab from an Islamic point of view. If Imam Mahdi dies, will darkness rule the world? Well, requires a very detailed analysis. What is ghusl? Well, I think you should refer to the Risala Amaliyya. Why couldn't the member people explain to Muslims how to properly invite and teach non-Muslims to Shia or even Sunni Islam? Explain. Well, this is the process that I've started. I just was talking about the same thing, that we really need to develop a methodology that not only invites, first you need to explain, but before we talk about invitation, we really need to focus on ourselves and learn our faith better than anybody else, and then go out and propagate. Well, the family characteristics of Yazid's parents, etc., I think it requires a little bit of historical analysis that I would prefer to deal with it on Thursday afternoon, inshallah. So we have addressed few small questions within the time that we have, but quite few that we have to leave for the 2 hours that we have, 2 hours or 3 hours that we have on Thursday, inshallah. Now, as I have said, we switch channel and we go to a totally different language. By the way, the Thursday program, it's going to be an informal, not formal. After the prayer, I believe food is going to be served, and after the food it's going to be an informal gathering where sisters and brothers get together and we simply sit and have conversation. And these questions
after lunch, not
after
dinner.
lunch.
Not dinner.
Well,
Just kind of different.
it depends.
Come early.
Point taken, but it could go as far as dinner as well. So if you come after lunch, because I have got used to my lunch coming during dinner time, so don't be too harsh. So after lunch, we sit and we have an informal conversation. So the questions are posed, we address them inshallah, and then see where we can take it.